For 15 seasons and counting, we follow the doctors of Grey's Anatomy through personal and professional ups and downs. Characters have come and gone, there's been enormous loss and spectacular triumph. But no matter what, we keep coming back to follow the lives of these doctors and the patients they serve. Still, a decade and a half is a long time to tell a story. Over that time, it's inevitable that there would be some noteworthy plot holes that slip through the cracks. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the most head-scratching examples of plot holes from Grey's Anatomy that fans are still debating, ranked from senseless to plain impossible. One senseless plot hole we still wonder about is Jo Wilson's name change. Jo has a harrowing backstory that includes a terrible marriage to an abusive man, and it's that man who led her to change her name from Brooke Stadler to Jo Wilson at some point before she arrived at the hospital as an intern. So when Jo had to testify in court at Alex's trial, her main concern was that her ex would be able to use the records from the case to track her down. Seems reasonable, right? Except that if Jo legally changed her name, it shouldn't be a concern. Her old name wouldn't appear in the court records, only her new name, the one that her ex doesn't know about, would be listed. On the other hand, Jo's concern makes sense if she'd been using an alias all this time and had never changed her name legally. The trouble then is the rest of her life doesn't follow. Jo couldn't have gotten a job if she were using a fake name. A background check would discover this deception, and she'd never get hired. Another plot point that left fans confused was April's behavior right before she and the other residents took their medical boards. Up until that point, April had been very clear about her commitment to her Christian beliefs, which includes saving herself for marriage. While the other employees of the hospital often couldn't seem to keep their hands off of each other, April was determined to be the exception. Of course, she powered through having her convictions challenged more than once. Then all that changed in an instant. Under immense pressure and in need of relief, April impulsively decided to sleep with Jackson. All of a sudden, her beliefs no longer held her back, and she went for it without hesitation. The boards are a big deal, and it's understandable that the character needed to let go of some of her stress, but after sticking to her principles so conscientiously, it was hard to believe that was the way April would choose to take a break from her worries. Next up, the question fans still want answered. Whatever happened to Izzie Stevens? Izzie started as an intern the same time that Meredith and Alex did, and for the first 5 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, she was a standout character. Katherine Heigl even won an Emmy Award for her portrayal. Yet rumors of on-set strife ran rampant, and Heigl was eventually written off the show following Izzie's scary bout with cancer. On the show, though, Izzie just disappears without much of an explanation. She made a brief return in the next season, but the appearance shed little light on what happened to her character. And in season 14, Alex mentions that Izzie is married and has children. Outside of those instances, the character was just brushed aside. Of course, it's difficult when an actor leaves a show and won't be making guest appearances, but for the fans who invested so much into Izzie's story for the first 5 seasons, the departure of the character was extremely abrupt and unsatisfying. Izzie deserved better. If you want to make Grey's Anatomy fans roll their eyes, bring up the passing of Derek Shepherd. Everything surrounding his demise and its aftermath made very little sense. Derek met his end after being hit by a semi on a mountain road immediately after helping several other people who had gotten into a car accident right in front of him. Ever the good Samaritan, Derek pulled over to help and probably saved several lives in the process. After some emergency vehicles cleared out the injured in record time, Derek pulled his car out to leave but was distracted by the ringing of his cell phone. As he reached for it, he stopped his car in the middle of the road and looked up just in time to see the truck as it crashed into him. There are major plot holes throughout this sequence. First, Derek makes a big deal about the lack of cell reception where he is earlier in that episode. So how is he getting a cell phone call at all? Second, how did the emergency vehicles leave so quickly? Wouldn't someone have stayed behind to clean up the crash site? Third, Derek was on a clear stretch of road, so wouldn't he have seen a truck bearing down on him? And wouldn't the truck driver attempt to brake before he got that close to Derek's SUV? Finally, how could someone as smart as Derek do something as dumb as stopping their car right in the middle of the road, especially after just helping people in an accident? There was even more plot holes that came out of this story. For instance, how come Derek was taken to the hospital as John Doe? Was there no paperwork in the car with his name on it? Why were the doctors at this hospital so incompetent? And we're not even going to get into how Meredith handled what happened. Actually, yes, we are. Not only did she fail to call Derek's sister or any other member of his family before pulling the plug on her husband, she also disappeared for almost a year without telling anyone who cared about her where she went. Then she came back and picked up with her job as if nothing happened. While none of this is impossible, it makes very little sense. Another thing that fans have debated over the years is how old Meredith actually is. The evidence provided by the show leads to two conflicting answers. Here's what we know. In the pilot script, it states that when Meredith starts her internship, she's supposed to be 32. And during the season 11 introduction of Meredith's long-lost half-sister Maggie, we also learned that Meredith was 5 when Maggie was born, and Maggie came to Grey Sloan Memorial Hospital when she was 31. The math doesn't make sense though. If Meredith was 32 when she started her internship, she would be 8 years older than Maggie, not 5. So based on all that, Meredith is either 40 or 43. Another inconsistency when it comes to Meredith Grey is how she won the show's prestigious HARPER Avery Award. The show makes it clear that Meredith is a brilliant surgeon, sure, and the HARPER Avery is considered the pinnacle of professional success. However, when Christina, an equally brilliant surgeon, was nominated for the award just a few short years before Meredith, she couldn't win because Grey Sloan is partially owned by the HARPER Avery Foundation. Giving Christina the award would create a conflict of interest. Presumably, that conflict of interest would apply to every doctor working at the hospital, but somehow, when Meredith was nominated for the award, the rules changed. The whole thing just makes us feel bad for Christina. Yet another brilliant surgeon on the show is brain surgeon Amelia. But there was a revelation about her character that resulted in a number of plot holes. Amelia had been walking around with a giant brain tumor for years. The kicker, she's one of the only surgeons in the world who could fix it. We love dramatic irony as much as anyone, but this development seemed a little odd. Amelia's behavior had always been erratic, so it makes sense that the show's writers would want to do something to explain her impulsivity. At first, it seemed like Amelia wouldn't make it through the complicated and difficult surgery to remove the tumor. Everyone was relieved when she did, but this is when things become especially odd. It's strange enough that the tumor could have been growing in Amelia's head for almost 10 years and she showed no other signs of trouble outside of her behavior. But after her surgery, all she needed was a brief recovery and then she was just fine. Even if Amelia was the luckiest person on the planet, it seems impossible that a huge tumor could be cut out of someone's brain without resulting in any difficulties afterward. Another plot point that made for high drama when it happened but seemed to have very little lasting consequences was the storyline around Arizona's leg. Arizona's leg was severely hurt in a plane crash, but once she was rescued, she insisted that it not be amputated. Eventually, Callie had to make the decision to do just that when it came to a choice between Arizona losing her leg or losing her life. Unsurprisingly, the loss of her leg was a profound impact on Arizona. She was devastated by what happened and spent a long time resisting doing anything because of it. As soon as she decided to learn to walk using her prosthetics, though, it all seemed to be forgotten. Arizona was quickly able to walk perfectly, and despite all the drama that it caused, the loss of her leg barely warranted a mention afterwards. A storyline that raised fans' eyebrows from the earlier seasons of the show was the romance and tragic end of the relationship between Izzie and Denny. Denny was Izzie's patient, but despite the professional ethics that should have kept them apart, they ended up falling in love. If that weren't enough though, Izzie came up with a scheme to push Denny higher on the heart transplant list, cut his LVAD, making him critically ill and placing him first in line for the next heart that was about to become available. Both of these things crossed ethical lines in the worst possible ways, and Izzie should have been fired for them. Romancing a patient, especially as an intern, is a big no-no. One of the reasons is when a doctor becomes emotionally attached to a patient, they do even more ethically dubious things like cut those patients' LVAD wires to game the transplant list. In real life, Izzie wouldn't practice medicine again and might even get slapped with criminal charges. Now for the biggest plot hole in Grey's Anatomy of all. After all the horrible things that happened to the people that work in Grey Sloan Memorial Hospital, why does anyone still want to work there? In the 15 seasons we've been watching the show, it's racked up quite a track record. This one hospital has witnessed an explosion, a mass shooting, a huge fire, and the electrocution of multiple doctors, resulting in one passing away. At one point, the private plane several of them were taking crashed in the middle of nowhere, fatally injuring several doctors. Plus, there's been the assorted accidents that have resulted in the untimely demise of multiple other doctors who work there. Yet, when it comes time to hire a new set of interns, the show made it seem like the applicants were breaking down the doors for a chance to work there. If you look at the track record of the people employed at the hospital, though, the place seems cursed. Why wouldn't the whole staff call it quits and find jobs someplace safer? So, there you have it. Clearly, Grey's Anatomy has steered itself into some pretty big plot holes over the years. Despite that, we still tune in every week to see what happens next, and we'll overlook some pretty impossible plot holes to find out. But that's part of loving a TV show for this long, and we're not sorry about it. We hope you feel the same way. Want more videos? Subscribe to The Binger and leave us a comment below. Thanks for watching.